I watched my manager Steven present my revolutionary software algorithm to the board of directors, claiming he developed it during his sleepless nights of innovation. 6 months later, when that algorithm generated $15 million in new revenue, he got promoted to VP while I remained a junior developer. But the patent application I'd filed months earlier was about to make him the most humiliated executive in company history. Before I dive into this story of corporate theft and the sweetest professional revenge imaginable, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever had a boss steal credit for your work, and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of workplace justice served cold. My name is Alexandra, I'm 26 years old, and until 8 months ago I believed that hard work and innovation would naturally lead to recognition and advancement. This story begins with late-night coding sessions and ends with a boardroom confrontation that destroyed a career built on stolen ideas. I work as a software developer at TechFlow Solutions, a mid-sized company in Austin that develops data management software for Fortune 500 companies. I've been with the company for 3 years, starting as a junior developer fresh out of college with a computer science degree and big dreams about changing the world through technology. My manager, Stephen Clark, was 38 years old and had been with TechFlow for 7 years. He'd worked his way up from senior developer to development manager, overseeing a team of 12 programmers. Stephen was smooth, charismatic, and excellent at presenting technical concepts to non-technical executives. He was also, as I would discover, particularly skilled at dismissing ideas from women on his team while stealing them behind our backs. From my first day at TechFlow, I noticed that Steven treated the female developers differently from our male colleagues. While he encouraged men on the team to share their innovative ideas in team meetings, he would often interrupt women mid-explanation or suggest that our proposals needed more development before being worth discussing. "Alexandra has some interesting thoughts," he'd say when I tried to contribute to technical discussions, "but I think she needs to develop her ideas further before they're ready for implementation." Meanwhile, half-formed suggestions from male junior developers would be met with enthusiastic support and immediate assignment to project teams. Steven made it clear that he expected all team members to share their ideas with him before presenting them anywhere else in the company, but I noticed he was particularly insistent about this rule with the women on his team. "I need to understand everything my female developers are working on," he told me during my orientation, though he'd never used the qualifier female when giving the same speech to male hires. "Women sometimes get enthusiastic about ideas that aren't quite ready for prime time. I can provide guidance to help you understand what will actually work in a business environment." Condescension was subtle but persistent. Steven had a way of making female team members feel like our technical judgment was inherently less reliable than our male colleagues and that we needed his oversight to produce work worthy of the company. For my first 2 years at TechFlow, I tried to work within this dynamic. I develop solutions to technical problems, share them with Steven, and watch as he either dismissed them outright or claimed credit for refining my work into something presentable. The pattern was always the same. If an idea came from a woman, Steven needed to improve it significantly before it was worth pursuing. If the same idea came from a man, Steven would immediately recognize its potential and assign resources to develop it further. Everything changed 8 months ago when I developed a breakthrough that would revolutionize how our software processed large datasets. I'd been working late in the office, trying to solve a persistent performance issue that was affecting several of our major clients. Our current algorithm for processing customer data was inefficient, often taking hours to analyze datasets that our clients needed processed in real time. Around 11 p.m., I had an insight about using machine learning principles to predict data patterns and pre-process information more efficiently. Instead of analyzing every data point sequentially, the algorithm could learn to identify patterns and prioritize processing based on likely outcomes. I spent the entire weekend developing and testing the concept. By Sunday night, I had a working prototype that processed the same datasets 300% faster than our existing system. The improvement was dramatic. What had been taking 4 hours was now completed in 80 minutes. I was excited to share the breakthrough with Steven on Monday morning. This wasn't just an incremental improvement, this was the kind of innovation that could transform our entire product line and give us a massive competitive advantage. Steven, I think I've developed something that could be huge for the company, I told him, practically bouncing with excitement as I explained the algorithm. Steven listened with the expression he always wore when female team members presented technical work, a mixture of skepticism and barely concealed condescension. Alexandra, this is interesting, he said in the tone adults use when children show them crayon drawings. But machine learning is quite complex. Are you sure you understand the full implications of what you're proposing? I've run extensive tests, Steven. The results are consistent across all scenarios. This algorithm doesn't just improve processing speed, it actually increases accuracy by catching data patterns our current system misses. That's ambitious, Steven replied, emphasizing the word like it was a character flaw. But real-world business applications are much more complicated than academic exercises. Our clients value reliability over experimental technology. This isn't experimental, Steven. I have months of testing data that proves… Alexandra, he interrupted, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you're still learning how enterprise software development works. Why don't you continue working on this as a side project? Just don't get your hopes up about immediate practical applications. The dismissal was swift and absolute. Steven had a way of making you feel foolish for even suggesting that your work might be valuable, especially if you were a woman challenging his technical authority. I was disappointed but not entirely surprised. Steven had dismissed ideas from female team members before, often only to implement similar concepts months later, after male colleagues independently developed them. I continued refining the algorithm during my spare time, documenting every improvement and running extensive tests to prove its reliability and commercial viability. 3 weeks later, I tried again to present the improved algorithm to Steven. I think it's ready for broader review, I told him. The performance gains are consistent across all test scenarios, and I've built in multiple redundancy checks to ensure reliability that exceeds our current system. Alexandra, we've discussed this, Steven said with the patient tone of someone explaining something to a slow child. I understand you're excited about your project, but machine learning algorithms require expertise that takes years to develop. Focus on the assignments you're qualified to handle. Steven, I have a computer science degree with a concentration in machine learning. I'm qualified to… Academic knowledge and practical business application are very different things, he cut me off. Trust me to know when ideas are ready for commercial development. The subtext was clear. As a young woman, my technical judgment was inherently suspect, and Steven's experience gave him the authority to determine the value of work he hadn't even bothered to properly review. I filed away my revolutionary algorithm and went back to working on routine maintenance tasks and minor feature updates that Steven deemed appropriate for someone of my gender and experience level. 2 months passed without any mention of my algorithm. I had nearly forgotten about it when Steven called an all-hands meeting for our development team in early March. I've been working on something that I think could transform our entire product offering, Steven announced to the room. Over the past few months, during some sleepless nights of innovation, I've developed a new data processing algorithm that could give us a huge competitive advantage. My heart started racing as Steven described his algorithm. Every technical detail he mentioned was identical to what I had developed and shown him months earlier. The machine learning components, the predictive processing, the efficiency gains, everything was exactly what I had created. Initial testing shows this algorithm can process datasets up to 300% faster than our current system, Steven continued, while actually improving accuracy through predictive error detection. I sat in stunned silence as my manager took credit for months of my work, presenting my innovation to the team as his own breakthrough. But what made it even more galling was the enthusiastic response from my male colleagues. Steven, this is brilliant, said Marcus, one of the senior developers. The machine learning integration is exactly what we've been missing. How did you come up with the predictive processing approach? Asked David, another team member. It's such an innovative solution. Steven basked in the praise, describing technical decisions I had made as examples of his own brilliance and innovation. After the meeting, I approached Steven privately, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. Steven, the algorithm you just presented, that's the work I showed you 3 months ago. Alexandra, I think you're confused, he replied with the condescending smile I'd come to hate. You showed me some very preliminary ideas that inspired my research, but what I've developed is far more sophisticated than your initial brainstorming. It's identical, Steven. Every component you described is exactly what I built and tested. That's a very serious accusation, Alexandra. I'd be careful about claiming credit for work that's clearly beyond your current capabilities. The algorithm I've developed required advanced expertise in machine learning architecture that frankly exceeds what they teach in undergraduate computer science programs. The gaslighting was breathtaking. Steven was not only stealing my work but suggesting I was delusional and technically incompetent for claiming I'd created something so sophisticated. Steven, I have all my original code and documentation timestamped from months ago. Code that was developed on company time using company resources under my supervision and guidance, he replied smoothly. Any intellectual property you create here belongs to TechFlow, and as your manager, I'm responsible for determining how that IP is utilized and developed into commercially viable products. He was technically correct about the intellectual property belonging to the company, but he was completely wrong about who had created it. And his claim that he'd provided supervision and guidance was an outright lie. He'd dismissed my work without even reviewing it properly. Besides, Steven added with a smirk, you should be flattered that your preliminary research contributed to such an important breakthrough. Not every junior developer gets to be part of something this significant. That night, I went home and made copies of all my original work, the code, the documentation, the test results, everything. I also started researching intellectual property law and company policies about attribution of employee innovations. But more importantly, I remembered something I'd done months earlier that Steven didn't know about. 2 weeks later, Steven presented his algorithm to the executive team. I wasn't invited to the presentation, but word spread quickly through the company that Steven had developed a game-changing innovation. Steven's new algorithm is exactly what we need to differentiate ourselves in the market, our CEO announced in a company-wide email. This kind of innovative thinking is what will drive TechFlow's future growth. Steven was praised as a visionary, a brilliant technical mind who understood both the engineering and business implications of his innovation. He was featured in the company newsletter, interviewed for an industry podcast, and invited to speak at a major tech conference about breakthrough innovation in enterprise software development. The industry recognition was particularly painful to watch. Steven was being celebrated as an example of technical excellence, giving interviews about his innovative approach to machine learning in business applications. Meanwhile, I continued working on routine assignments, watching as my stolen innovation was celebrated throughout the company and the industry. The male developers who had praised Steven's brilliant work would occasionally ask me what I thought of his algorithm, not realizing they were asking me to compliment my own stolen innovation. The real betrayal came 6 weeks later when TechFlow landed the biggest client contract in company history. Pinnacle Industries, a major manufacturing company, had been struggling with data processing bottlenecks that were affecting their production efficiency. When our sales team demonstrated Steven's revolutionary algorithm, Pinnacle immediately recognized its potential to solve their problems. Contract was worth $15 million over 3 years, the largest deal in TechFlow's history. The algorithm I had developed would be the cornerstone of Pinnacle's new data management system, generating massive revenue for our company and transforming their business operations. Steven was promoted to Vice President of Product Development, received a substantial bonus, and was hailed as the architect of TechFlow's bright future. Trade publications ran articles about his rise from development manager to VP, praising his technical vision and innovative leadership. I received a standard annual raise and continued reporting to Steven's replacement as development manager. The injustice was crushing, but I felt powerless to challenge it. Steven had positioned himself as the creator of the algorithm, backed by his authority as my manager and his reputation within the company. My claims would look like sour grapes from a junior female developer who couldn't accept that her male manager had built upon her preliminary ideas. But I had one advantage that Steven didn't know about. 3 months before I'd first shown the algorithm to Steven, I had filed a provisional patent application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I'd done it almost as an afterthought, inspired by a lunch conversation with my friend Maria, who worked in intellectual property law. She'd mentioned that individual employees could file patents for their innovations, even when working for companies, as long as they did so before disclosing the invention to their employer. It's mainly useful if you ever want to start your own company using your innovations, she'd explained. But it also provides legal documentation of when you created something, which can be valuable for attribution disputes, especially for women in tech, where our contributions often get minimized or stolen. That last comment had hit home. Maria had shared stories of female engineers whose innovations had been credited to male colleagues or supervisors, and how difficult it was to prove ownership without proper documentation. I'd filed the provisional patent application for $320, documenting my algorithm in technical detail and establishing my legal claim as the inventor. The application was dated 4 months before Steven's first presentation to our development team. Now, watching Steven receive promotions and praise for my stolen work, I decided it was time to use that patent application. I contacted Patricia Kim, an intellectual property attorney who specialized in employee invention disputes and had a reputation for representing women in tech industry cases. "This is a textbook case of invention theft," she told me after reviewing my documentation. "You have time-stamped code, detailed technical documentation, and most importantly, a patent application that predates any of your manager's claims by months. The fact that he dismissed your work as not ready for prime time, while later presenting it as his own innovation, makes this even more egregious. What are my options?" "Several. You can file a complaint with your company's legal department, demand proper attribution and compensation. You can file a lawsuit against both your manager and the company for theft of intellectual property. Or you can license your patent to competitors, which would give them access to the same technology your company is using. What would you recommend?" "Let's start by documenting everything and sending a formal notice to your company's legal department. Give them a chance to make this right before we escalate to more aggressive measures." "But Alexandra, I have to warn you, companies often fight these cases aggressively, especially when a female employee challenges a male executive. They'll try to discredit your technical capabilities and suggest you're being vindictive." "I'm prepared for that. I have the evidence to back up my claims." Patricia drafted a formal letter to TechFlow's general counsel, documenting my creation of the algorithm, providing time-stamped evidence of my work, and referencing my patent application as proof of inventorship. The letter requested immediate acknowledgement of my role as the inventor, appropriate compensation for the commercial success of my innovation, and correction of all public statements crediting Steven with the algorithm's development. The response from TechFlow's legal department came within 48 hours and was exactly what Patricia had predicted. "Ms. Anderson," the letter began, "we have reviewed your claims regarding the data processing algorithm developed by VP Steven Clark. While we appreciate your enthusiasm about your contributions to the preliminary research that may have informed Mr. Clark's innovation, our investigation confirms that the algorithm currently in use was independently developed by Mr. Clark using his extensive expertise in machine learning and predictive analytics." The letter went on to state that any work I had done was performed under Steven's supervision as part of my employment duties, and that TechFlow owned all intellectual property created by employees during their tenure with the company. "We consider this matter closed and advise against any further claims that could be construed as defamatory toward Mr. Clark or damaging to TechFlow's business interests. We also note that your allegations could be seen as an attempt to undermine a respected executive's reputation out of personal or professional jealousy." The final paragraph was the most insulting. "We encourage you to focus on your current assignments and professional development rather than pursuing claims that appear to stem from a misunderstanding of the collaborative nature of software development and the different levels of expertise required for enterprise-level innovation." Patricia laughed when I showed her the response, though there was anger in her eyes. "Classic corporate response to a female employee challenging a male executive," she said. They're suggesting you're too inexperienced to have created something sophisticated, too emotional to understand business realities, and probably just jealous of Steven's success. It's a textbook attempt to discredit a woman's technical capabilities. What's our next move? We file a formal lawsuit against both Steven Clark and TechFlow Solutions for theft of intellectual property, fraud, and intentional interference with your patent rights. And we make sure the industry knows exactly what happened here. The lawsuit was filed in federal court 2 weeks later. Complaint detailed my creation of the algorithm, Steven's theft of my work, and TechFlow's knowing use of stolen intellectual property to generate millions in revenue. But more importantly, the lawsuit included my patent application as Exhibit A, providing indisputable proof that I had invented the algorithm months before Steven had claimed credit for it. The impact was immediate and devastating for both Steven and TechFlow. Within 24 hours of the lawsuit being filed, technology industry publications picked up the story. Female developer accuses TechFlow VP of stealing $1 million algorithm, read the headline in TechCrunch. Patent documents challenge executives' innovation claims, announced InfoWorld. Another tech bro caught stealing from female engineer, declared Wired. The story resonated with women throughout the tech industry who shared similar experiences of having their innovations stolen or minimized by male colleagues and supervisors. Social media exploded with #TechTheft hashtags as female engineers shared their own stories of stolen credit and dismissed contributions. Steven's reputation in the industry collapsed overnight. The same podcasts and conferences that had celebrated his innovation now questioned whether any of his previous accomplishments were legitimate. Female engineers who had worked with him in the past began speaking out about instances where their contributions had been minimized or credited to male colleagues under Steven's leadership. TechFlow's stock price dropped 15% as investors worried about potential damages and the company's culture of intellectual property theft. More damaging was the public relations nightmare as the company became a symbol of Silicon Valley's well-documented problems with gender discrimination and credit theft. Most crucially, Pinnacle Industries put its $15 million contract on hold pending the outcome of the lawsuit. They couldn't risk implementing technology that might be subject to patent disputes or legal challenges, especially given the public attention the case was receiving. TechFlow's legal team finally took my claims seriously and requested a meeting to discuss settlement options. Ms. Anderson, the general counsel said during our first settlement conference, we're prepared to acknowledge that you may have made significant contributions to the algorithm in question. May have made contributions? Patricia interrupted. My client invented the entire algorithm. Your VP stole it completely and then dismissed her technical capabilities while taking credit for her innovation. That's a matter of interpretation. Mr. Clark supervised Ms. Anderson's work and provided guidance that was essential to the algorithm's development. Patricia placed my patent application on the table. This patent application was filed before Ms. Anderson showed her invention to Mr. Clark. Documents every component of the algorithm in technical detail. Unless Mr. Clark has a time machine, he couldn't have invented something that my client had already patented. She also produced transcripts of Steven's public interviews where he described the algorithm's development, claiming he'd worked on it during sleepless nights and presenting it as his personal breakthrough. Your client will need to explain to a jury how he independently developed an algorithm identical to one that was already patented by the employee he supervised. And he'll need to explain why he dismissed Ms. Anderson's work as not ready for prime time if he was simultaneously developing the same technology himself. The room went silent as TechFlow's lawyers realized the strength of our position and the public relations disaster they were facing. 2 weeks later, Steven Clark was terminated for reasons related to intellectual property compliance, according to the company's press release. TechFlow didn't explicitly admit that he'd stolen my work, but the industry understood what the termination meant. The settlement negotiations took another month, but the outcome exceeded my expectations. TechFlow agreed to pay me $2.5 million in damages, a portion of the revenue generated by my algorithm. They also agreed to publicly acknowledge my role as the inventor, correct all previous statements crediting Steven, and implement new policies to prevent intellectual property theft by managers. Most importantly for the broader industry, they agreed to establish a fund for supporting women's innovation in tech and to undergo company-wide training on recognizing and preventing gender-based credit theft. They also offered me Steven's former position as Vice President of Product Development, along with a substantial salary increase and equity stake in the company. But I had a better idea. "I appreciate the offer," I told the CEO during our final settlement meeting, "but I think I'll be starting my own company." Using the settlement money and my patent portfolio, I founded Quantum Analytics, a data processing company that licensed advanced algorithms to enterprise clients. My first major contract was with Pinnacle Industries, which decided they preferred working directly with the actual inventor of the technology they needed. Within 6 months, Quantum Analytics had signed contracts worth $8 million, competing directly with TechFlow using technology one had invented while working there. But more importantly, I built a company culture that valued and protected innovation from all team members, regardless of gender. Steven, meanwhile, struggled to find employment in the tech industry. The lawsuit and subsequent media coverage had made him unemployable at any reputable company. Case had become a high-profile example of innovation theft in tech, and his name was permanently associated with stealing credit from female employees. I heard through industry contacts that he'd moved to a different state and taken a non-technical role at a much smaller company, far from the Silicon Valley ecosystem where his reputation was destroyed. The experience taught me valuable lessons about intellectual property, corporate politics, and the importance of documenting your work. I learned that innovation without proper legal protection is vulnerable to theft, especially for women in tech, where our contributions are often minimized or dismissed. But most importantly, I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth and having the evidence to back it up. Steven's career was destroyed not by any elaborate scheme I devised, but by the simple fact that he had stolen credit for work he hadn't done, and I could prove it. The patent application I filed for $320 became the foundation of a multi-million-dollar company and proved that good ideas, properly protected, will always find their way to success, even when people try to steal them from women who are supposedly not ready for prime time. Today, Quantum Analytics employs 25 people, with a workforce that's 60% women and has generated over $25 million in client value. We maintain strict policies about attribution and intellectual property rights, and we've become a symbol in the industry of what's possible when women's innovations are protected and celebrated rather than stolen. I occasionally run into former TechFlow employees at industry events. They always express amazement at how quickly everything unraveled for Steven once the truth came out, and many female engineers have thanked me for fighting back against a practice that had affected them too. "Did you plan this revenge from the beginning?" one former colleague asked me recently. "It wasn't revenge," I replied. "It was just justice." Steven destroyed his own career by stealing someone else's work and dismissing their technical capabilities based on gender. I just provided the documentation that proved it. The most satisfying moment came 6 months after starting Quantum Analytics, when TechFlow approached us about licensing some of our newer algorithms. Their current development team, working without Steven's innovative leadership, had been unable to replicate the success of my original breakthrough. I politely declined their request. Some bridges, once burned by intellectual property theft and gender discrimination, should stay burned. But I did send them a copy of my latest patent application just to show them what real innovation looks like when it's properly attributed to its actual creator, regardless of gender. If you enjoyed this story of corporate theft and entrepreneurial revenge, please give this video a like and subscribe to True Revenge for more stories of workplace justice served. Share your own experiences with credit theft in the comments below. Have you ever had a boss or colleague steal your ideas, especially if you're a woman in a male-dominated field? Remember, if you develop innovative solutions in your work, document everything and consider filing patent applications to protect your intellectual property. You never know when legal protection might be the only thing standing between you and someone who wants to steal your life's work. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the best revenge against people who steal your ideas is building something even better and making sure everyone knows who really created it.